Hi, students. These are your notes for 5.1, which we're going to talk about angles and how to measure angles. So the definition of an angle is you have a ray. A ray is known as it has a starting point and it goes on infinitely in one direction. So there's one ray. An angle is composed of two rays and they meet at that end point. So here is an angle. Here's my endpoint. Here's one ray, and here's the other ray. So it's really important how we measure angles so we can get the same answer. Well, the first thing is before I measure it is that this where they meet at that endpoint is known as your vertex. And where you start to measure is known as your initial side. And where you end is known as your terminal side. So the key thing is when you go counterclockwise, it's going to be a positive angle. And that is typically how we measure. There are going to be times that we don't measure that way. So just make sure you're paying attention to directions. So this is known as a positive angle. Whereas if here's the same angle, right? We have this vertex, we have the initial side, and we have a terminal side. But I'm always going to start measuring from the initial side, but now I'm going to go clockwise, and that is going to give me a negative angle. So for example, let's just say, this was 30 degrees, all right? Well, then this angle right here would have to be negative 330 degrees. And that's because a full circle is always 360 degrees. Now I can also measure going around and around and around. So here's my vertex, here's my initial side, and here's my terminal side. Well, I can start at my initial. I'm going to still go counterclockwise, but instead of stopping at that terminal side, I'm going to go around one full revolution is what I like to call that. So you went around one circle and then you did some more. So think about that. Like if that's still 30 degrees and I went around the circle once, this angle now is 390 degrees because of that 30 degrees plus the 360 for the full circle. You can go around this as many times as you'd like. So just realize that angles can be bigger than 360 degrees. And the key thing is, when you go counterclockwise, it's always a positive angle, counterclockwise positive. And when you go clockwise, it's a negative angle. And the just little pieces I want to mention is we'll be introducing new variables. Typically we use X and Y's. We're going to use some Greek letters for angles usually, and usually this little a is known as alpha. This B, it has like a tail with that B. This is known as beta. We won't see this one too much right here. It's like looks like a Y. This is known as gamma. Typically we'll use alpha and beta to denote our angles. All right, the one last thing I want to say in this little video before we go on to the second video is we always want to measure our angles in standard position, okay? And that's if the vertex is on the origin of the rectangular coordinate system and its initial side coincides with the positive x-axis. So what that means is if I go down here and show you, when I say rectangular coordinate system, that means I'm going to give myself axes. And you put your vertex on the origin and your initial side always has to coincide with the positive x-axis. And then it just, how much you open this is determine how big the angle is. So that's your initial side. And then here's our terminal side. So get in that habit of standard position. So I could also measure here But again, my vertex would go on the origin, and then my initial side is always on the positive x-axis. See you next time.